Hi, everyone. Yeah, this is awesome. Super good to be hanging out with Nathan Baggs. Finally get a chance for us to chat. And look, for folks that aren't too familiar, Nathan has a phenomenal YouTube channel where he's been sharing a ton of low-level stuff. A little bit of security, a little bit of like game hacking, a little bit of mods, a lot of reverse engineering. And I'm excited to finally get a chance to chat, learn from you a little bit, and I think you've got some show and tell. But before we dive into the fun stuff, Nathan, I don't know, can you do your spiel? Who are you? What are you up to? How's the channel going? Tell me everything.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So as you've already alluded to, my name is Nathan Baggs. I've been a professional software engineer for probably about a decade, maybe a little bit longer, across several industries, including cybersecurity at one point, but mainly like low-level C++ is what I've kind of really sort of been doing for most of my professional life, yeah. So I have opinions on the language, both good and bad, but it's kind of my bread and butter. But I've been fortunate enough to do some like reverse engineering and some low-level stuff within that kind of sphere as well. And I started YouTube about 3 years ago. At that point, I'd been writing my own game engine for about 2 years, and I thought, I'll do some YouTube videos on this, and we'll see what happens. So my first few videos were on that, and it had like okay success, like thousands of views, which is more than I ever expected when I started. So, and then I had one big hit, which is still my biggest video, which got like 800,000 views. It's absolutely mad on like comparing C++ and assembly. Yeah. And it's definitely not my style of video now. And I look back at it and like, there's a lot I could have done better, but like, I'm still proud of it for what it was at the time. But I could never really recreate that success. And I was just sort of started trying different things. Like I didn't want to just be doing C++ over and over again. Totally out of the blue, I did a video. I thought I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to do some reverse engineering because I've done it before. And it's a skill that I want to kind of get back into a little bit, keep sharp because I don't do it professionally. And I sort of sat down with Roller Coaster Tycoon because as legend has it, it was written by one guy entirely in x86 assembly. So I thought, well, let's pull this apart. Let's have a look. Let's try and figure out how, like, I don't know. I think the goal was like, how does some of the rendering work? So I sat down with x64debug and Ghidra, and I just sort of recorded like a couple of hours of that. And I think I cut it down to like 40 minutes, and it was just like, it was what it was. And I threw it out there, and I think it got like 1,000 views. And I was like, okay, that's not it. Let's try something else. And then, I mean, as you well know, like YouTube is a strange and mysterious beast because almost exactly 30 days later, it exploded. It got like 100,000 views in like over like the next like week. And I was like, oh, nice. Maybe this is it. So from there, I started doing more reverse engineering. I looked at some games from my childhood, like Worms 2 and some stuff like that. And then I just started, just evolving into that. Then I started looking at DRM, like how does old school DRM work? And now what I'm kind of looking at now is, I guess more like game preservation. So there's a lot of games out there that don't work on modern Windows. And that's an absolute tragedy because these are experiences, core parts of people's childhoods and fun. So I'm now sort of looking a little bit more into that. Like, what does it take to get these games that don't work to work? And that's like looking at the differences over different versions of Windows, like doing some patching, doing reverse engineering, sort of like debugging on kind of hard mode. It's like a production build with no symbols, highly optimized, and it doesn't, and like it crashes here. Like, can it not? So that's kind of what I've been looking at the moment. That's kind of where I'm now.
That is super cool. And seriously, genuinely, I'm trying to, help folks go take a look at Nathan's channel because it has so much cool stuff in there. And it's just fascinating. How long have you been doing? I mean, I know you said YouTube 3 years, 10 years for some software development. When did it kind of, click in to think, let's pivot to either that game reverse engineering or that game preservation? Was that relatively recent? When was that amongst
year or so, I'd say, maybe year and a half. I think that's probably when it started doing it. And I was like, okay, well, let me try to do some more videos on this. And then they took off. And so it's probably about that sort of time frame. And definitely, I think, going to be the foreseeable future. It's a lot of hard work, but ultimately rewarding. Like, I've had people message me saying, hey, this game now works and it's my childhood and it didn't work before, so thank you. And like, ultimately, like, what a great use of my time that is, I think.
That's probably a very cool feeling. That is awesome. Do you take any requests? Do you have stuff on the horizon? The next things you're tackling?
What a great segue into what I want to show you today. But as a small plug, I do have a Discord now, which I'm slowly growing. And there's a channel in there for video suggestions. And I get sent stuff all the time. Like, I have a very open email address. I have open DMs. I'm happy for me to contact me about anything. And I get lots of suggestions of like, this doesn't work, or can you look at this? And I look at them all and I make a note. And that list is now pretty long. And every now and then I sort of triage it and I go through and I'm like, what could be interesting? Because somewhat selfishly, it does need to serve a video, I think, like, you know, to kind of grow the channel and kind of grow the sort of the reach of it. Also, if I think it has that sweet spot of being technically interesting, achievable by just me in my free time, like I have a full-time job that's not this, and a family, so, and I think makes a compelling video, then if that sort of trifecta lines up, then, you know, we'll give it a go. Someone did post in there about a game from like a point-and-click adventure game from their childhood, Disc Noir, which I've never played, but it's based on the novels by Terry Pratchett, who is one of my favorite authors. So I was like, oh, well, the interest is there. They said that it crashes on Windows 11, like the cutscene, you get into the cutscene, it crashes. Like, okay, interesting. This was released in like the late 90s. It might not have even supported XP. So there's probably a difference in Windows since then and now. So I was like, okay, that's probably it. And whenever I start off, I do like a little bit of elaboration. So I sort of head down, just hack on it just to sort of scope out the problem. Like, is this viable? Is this doable by me? What do I think the end result is? And that elaboration for this video has gone on for 3 weeks now. And as you'll see, I'm actually no further towards my end goal than I started. So like, if you're watching this and you suggest that video, like, I still weasel words. I cannot, like, there's no guarantee I'll actually be able to do it, but I'll show you what I've done so far today, because it's kind of interesting. Been a lot of battle I'm almost at the point where I can start doing the fixing, if that, and you'll see what I mean by that, hopefully, as we get through it.
Totally. Well, do you think we should dive into screen share right away?
Yeah,
we can
click
fire
the
it
button
up
and see what happens. Right, I've done my best to embiggen all the fonts, because I work off a 42-inch monitor, so I can have everything on screen at once, so I can fully absorb all the misery. So this is my usual workflow, is I'll have a VM or a debugger on the left, and then I'll have Ghidra on the right, and then off screen on another monitor I have notes, and which is where my notes are for this video, and our faces. And yeah, I just sort of flick between the two. So hopefully that's kind of visible, I guess. You know, zoom in and cut in as you need to. I'm just going to start talking and chip in if if you've got any questions, basically. So I've never played this game. I don't own a copy of it. So I found a copy of it on some dodgy abandonware site, which I seem to spend an awful lot of my time on, which is hence why it's in a VM, because I absolutely don't trust any of that stuff on my host machine. I will trust a CD that I brought off eBay for some reason, but because it looks legit. But yeah, definitely a random ISO from the internet. I'm maintaining a healthy level of skepticism. So here's the ISO that I've mounted. And there's a few interesting things in here that immediately like jump out to me as I look at this. Like, there's these random files called like 1.temp, and there's a .icd file and a clockspiel.exe, and these are all indicative of SafeDisk. So sort of very, very classic 90s, early 2000s DRM that you was commercial, you bought it off the shelf, you slapped it in your game, and then you hoped that people couldn't break it. SafeDisk has been broken for many, many years, and there are no CD cracks and breaks for all these online. Part of what I want to try and show people is like the techniques that you use to solve these problems, not just go to this site and download this random DLL and slap it in your directory and hope for the best. So I kind of don't look too much into the prior art. I try and figure it out as I go along, like as if we were back on the scene in the 90s. Like, you know, I'm nowhere near the level of technical ability that those guys were, who were like, a new game would come out and they'd have it cracked, you know, be a race who could crack it first, and they'd probably have it cracked within like, you know, a week or days. I'm in my own time kind of recreating those glory days. So this is going to be that kind of DRM. There's an interesting thing with this DRM. There's two interesting things immediately here. There's the secdrive.sys. This is a Windows driver that the game installs for you, which is so lovely of it to install a Windows driver for you. The thing with this DRM is, I don't know the full technical details of it, but basically it embeds special information in the disk such that commercial CD copiers won't be able to duplicate it. It has like bad sectors and like incorrect CRC checks. So if you try and clone it, you will not get a 100% clone of the disk. In that bit that they've missed, they'll put important information that verifies you have the disk. So this game, even though it's mounted as an ISO, this game will know that it's not a real disk. And the other thing is that this driver has a vulnerability in it, and Windows discontinued it. So after Vista, you cannot play any game with this DRM because this driver will not run. Oh, wow. So okay. Also an issue. So those are kind of the things that, you know, are kind of up against. I've done videos on this before, so this is going to be kind of going off some previous dives on this. But yeah, so that's what that file does there. This ICD file, this is version 1 of SafeDisk, because this is the game, but it's encrypted. Oh. So what it does is it installs a launcher, and the launcher runs, verifies you've got the CD, finds the encryption key off those special sections of the CD that weren't copied over, then it decrypts the game and runs it for you. So from this ISO alone, would it not be able to run? No. I'll show it in a minute. But so this is like a PE file. It's an executable file in itself, but in the sections, these code section here is all gibberish. It's all garbage. So if I go 64,000, so if I just these should be the bytes, but these are non. Sorry, the font size is a little bit smaller. I can't control this, but these are like non-valid instructions, right? I don't know what a STST7 is, but it's unlikely a compiler is probably is intended to put that there. So yeah, if you try and launch this, it won't work. You need like the pre-step, which does effectively the disk authorization for you.
Interesting.
So that's kind of the first thing. So I've installed it here. So this is what it looks like when it's installed, apart from these two files which I've added, which I'll get onto later because that's part of like the bypass. But yeah, basically you run tin3dxd, and then this will go. It will look for your disk, in this case the E drive. It will find the ICD file and it will try and decrypt it. Obviously, it won't be able to because it doesn't have all those precursor steps. And in fact, because this is Windows 10, it won't even get that far. So if you just try and run it, like I think this is because it's trying to access a driver that is unsigned and Windows is disabled. But even if you just like, I don't know, hope for the best and run it as admin. I'll run anything once in a VM. Like nothing happens, right? So this is about as far as we get. So the first thing I would normally do now is I'm like, right, let's fire this up in a debugger. Let's start poking around the guts. I've already got it kind of open in Ghidra over here, so we can kind of look around at it. Let's open this up, step forward. And if I run it immediately, it's like, what you doing?
That's the game that has like the anti-debugging techniques?
Yeah. So we already know we're onto like an interesting journey here because the game itself is trying to prevent us doing this. So it's like, right, okay, so I want to see why the game doesn't work. I first need to run the game, but in order to figure out why I can't run the game, I now need to attach a debugger. So I guess we're going to look at the anti-debugging techniques first. So this is kind of like, I'm already 2 steps back from where I want to be starting. So this is kind of like, okay, I think if you let me run that again. First things I like to do is look for strings. Pretty standard practice. So if I search for strings, the debugger, the string is there, so the string's not obfuscated, but it's in like the Windows resource section, so there's no references to this. Like I don't know what code is loading it because it's going to go through the Win32 API for loading like the internal exe references. A lot of what I do is like, what can I actually be bothered to do? Like, do you know what I mean? Like it's trying to where is my time best focused? What's the easiest probably to do is just set a breakpoint on the function that produces the message box because that's definitely hit, and then presumably somewhere before that it's like a if
there's the check.
If something, show the message box. So what we'll do is we'll just do that. So symbols, I know it's in user32.dll, and then it's message box A. So if I just set breakpoint on that, and then we run through to it. So we're here now. So we've hit the message box. So that was nice and simple. If we go up the call stack, we can see it's called from
we can see it
here. Yeah, so it's called from here. So then we can go over to Ghidra and have a look at where we get to here. I think this is some sort of localization stuff, like the get system default LSID. I take a look at this and like whatever this does is somewhat irrelevant because at the end it calls message box. So that's presumably like, this function is producing a message box. So let me go up the call stack to where that's called. So this is then I'll start trying to just figure out where things called from. So it's called from here, and this is interesting, right? So it's like if this variable doesn't equal 0, then call this function which shows the message box. And I've already started adding some words to this. So this is not that symbol wasn't in there. So you can assume any function names I've added through this sort of journey.
So just for me to regurgitate, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Hey, you opened it up, tried to do some dynamic analysis first with the debugger. Debugger whined at us because, hey, you shouldn't be using a debugger. So you're thinking, all right, that's fine. Let's table dynamic analysis. Let's go static analysis with Ghidra. We can look for the string of that message box. Well, that string is not an easy place, so let's kind of zoom out. Let's just look for the get message box or show message box function call. Got to do that in the debugger because it was just before you'd hit that trap. But then we can say, okay, let's look at the call stack. Let's see what actually brought us to that place. And let's just take that address, go look again in Ghidra, kind of piecemeal back and forth in both static and dynamic analysis, just taking one address to go look at the next spot and the next spot.
Yes.
Cool.
Correct, cool. Yeah. So I think in this one, I've attempted to patch it out before because I've just zored it out. So let's ignore that for a second. Let's go to, I have many Ghidras open. Let's go to a cleaner one. So this is this function, right? This is the one that the result of this says, oh, you should show the message box or not. Now, I don't know about you, but like this doesn't look like code. Like it looks like an absolute hot mess. And the assembly is also very strange. So let's put a little breakpoint on this. So again, lots of red angry from the debugger, like it doesn't like disassembling this code. So what you do is if you start stepping through it instruction by instruction, does the function epilogue, and then it goes jump, 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 and then it jumps and 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 jumps. And basically they put in 50, 100, 150 jump instructions in amongst all the code to make it so that all this tooling doesn't really work. And it's even worse than that because here, I don't know if it wasn't that obvious, some of the instructions are unaligned as well. So you can't even see where the jump instructions. And this one calls STC, which changes the flags in the CPU. So then like your relative jumps might do something different because it now thinks like a number is less than another number or whatever. So this is pretty grim. And then it like at this point like equals get version XA, which doesn't seem that important to me. So maybe there's extra code in there that looks valid that isn't. And then it does another jump and then you keep going through. So yeah, basically what it does is it does loads of jumps and then it'll do like a little bit of code and then it'll do some more jumps and then it'll do a little bit of code and then it'll do some more jumps and then a little bit of code. And this, when you try and decompile that, so you try to heuristically turn that assembly back into C code, is just like reams and reams of rubbish. Like nothing in here makes much sense because all the valid code is interspersed with it. So like, I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Like how would you approach this problem? Because I'm kind of curious to know, given like there's very little information, what your initial thoughts are on this.
I feel like that's a neat technique. I feel like I would let myself probably fall down the rabbit hole a little bit more, parsing through step instructions to get to where's basically the last thing that would be just before it returns the value, yes or no, pop the message, oh, you're in a debugger, bail out. Because if we could just nop that or patch it to whatever semblance of saying like, okay, no, you're fine, don't worry. I know I'm in a debugger, but let me keep rolling. That's really the sweet spot that I'd be looking for, even if it's in this jumpy, spiky, random code assortment. Yes. Is that kind of right?
I think there's no right or wrong in this. There's just different levels of misery. I think that's basically it. But like this jump, I don't know if there's a name for it. This jump chaining thing is all over the binary. It's literally almost every function has this in. So it's already starting to slow us down. Can I fix this? Yeah. So I thought, how would I have written this in the first place? Because no program is sitting there hand rolling 50, 100, 150 jump instructions, misaligned instructions. Like it's clearly tooling done, right? It's like a post-processing step. Like your developers will write to the game and then they'll buy in this software and then you'll presumably throw it at that and then it will do it. There's going to be like an algorithm that it does. And if I was doing it, like the simplest way, most of the jumps just tend to be forward. So what I would probably do is I'd probably break up like a function into blocks of assembly, maybe even ones that represent a line of code if you had like the PDB file or something like that. And then I would spread them out and then I would shove those jumps in between them. That's how I would do it. I would just like expand the code and fill it with like jump chains. So what I did is I started writing some code to basically heuristically detect these jump chains. So it's a little built-in disassembler. I don't know, have you heard of a library called Capstone?
I have, yes.
Yeah, so this just wraps Capstone. It's just a free, pretty good decompiler. So you give it
some... C, super cool.
Well, I wrap it in C++. So because here's my C++ abstraction around the C API. But yeah, so you give it some bytes, and then it will attempt to disassemble it and give you what looks like this, so the mnemonics and the arguments. So I chew through that, and then basically the code's it's not my best code. This probably wouldn't be on my CV, but basically starting at the beginning of the binary and moving one byte at a time, I try and disassemble every single block of byte, in a sliding window. And if it does disassemble and the mnemonic starts with a J, I'm like, that's probably a jump instruction, right? Because I'm not an x86 expert. I don't think there's many mnemonics that start with a J that aren't a jump. So I'm like, okay, fine. And then what I do is if I like that's a jump, I'll take the argument, which is the offset, and then I'll jump to that point and I'll disassemble it. And if that starts with a J, I'll take the offset and I'll disassemble it. And I effectively simulate the code through these jump chains, and I keep track of all the ones that I've done. And then I have to handle like a whole load of miserable edge cases, like that STC thing we saw. I have to handle that because that might affect which way the jumps go and whether they're taken or not. There's an interesting one where if you have an if statement and that starts the jump chain, I don't want to include that first if, because then I might accidentally overcommit and take out like the else branch or the other thing. So I have to then kind of be like, oh, if it's the first one and it's a J or JNE, because heuristically those seem to be the only ones that do this, count for that, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm like, okay, I'll log this as like what I've called like a jump chain. So like the beginning, I'll work out where the start of that jump chain is and where the instruction is that it ends, because I know after that is code. And then I'm like, if the chain is, I don't know, I just took a guess, that's more than 3, because I don't want to be too overzealous, then I will go, then I'll nop it out. So I will then replace all those jumps with nops myself. And that's kind of my attempt to like de-obfuscate this code. And that's, where's a good example of this? So here is, where was that function we were looking at? So this function here becomes this. So this is the same code, but I've knocked out all the jumps. And now Ghidra is like, oh, I can skip past that. And now it gives me much more readable code. So it's gone from this to this.
Much nicer.
A lot easier, and it is not perfect. I've made some mistakes. Sometimes it gives up halfway through a long chain. I don't know. I've not finished debugging it all, and I'm not sure if I ever will, but it got me enough to get going, and that's kind of part of the game, right? Is to build enough tooling that you can proceed without thinking, I have to productionize this and make it pretty and make it perfect. So it's not perfect, but now I can see, like, okay, so it calls get version XA based on the platform ID, which it should be 2. It does, it calls this function. So then we can call it, check into this function, that calls this function, which would be on the unclean one, would be this.
Oh.
So all this is just this one call. And then I was feeling reasonably pleased with myself. And I started looking through all this, and it was just like, it just keeps going and going and going. I was like, I'm not really getting any further here. Like, I definitely will need this clean code later, but like this one debugger check is not worth that time at the moment, because what I ended up doing is I just found the call site and I just changed the return value of that function in the debugger to basically say whatever that check was, it was fine. So we could at least get to like the next one, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Spoiler alert, there's another one.
Great.
So I'm just going to wire that up. If you've got any questions whilst I just quickly sort of set that up, then let me know.
Well, it's
quite a lot of
super
information
cool.
very quick there.
I mean, so I obviously, I feel like and stuff that I've got to play with previously, whether it's like, doing some reverse engineering, capture the flag challenge, or like binary exploitation pwn task.
Yeah.
Like I've played with Capstone very cursory, not a lot in Python, but I'm like, hey, Nathan, I know you like big fan of C++, and like it's hardcore. You got some awesome syntax to still be using Capstone, but I'm thinking, oh, dude, I've just done that in easy baby Python because I'm scared of C. Is there a real particular advantage for you one way or another? Do you feel like it makes a big difference or not? If you're like, hey, I know that I'm cutting up this binary and I'm not worried about it being production code. I'm not worried about it being fast. I just need it to be complete and done and working.
No, you should pick whatever gets you to the result fastest. If it's not like, I mean, I've worked as a professional software engineer, so I've like had to ship code and then like maintain it.
Right.
So it's like a product, and then there's like internal tooling. Like, you should do whatever gets you there fastest. I absolutely, like, because like time is a reasonably precious commodity, right? So it's just because I've done C++ for so much, I know it's probably the best out of any language, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's better or worse than anything else. It's just what I'm kind of familiar enough with to kind of get going, if that makes sense.
No, totally.
Yeah, so here's the test, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint on this test, and then I'm going to move forward here. Okay, so this is the test. So this is returned 1, okay? Whatever that check was, which again, like I kind of took the view that at this point in time, maybe I will need to go back and look at it. But for now, I know that it is returning a value based on whether there's a debugger attached or not. For now, because I might be able to patch the binary later, like you saw, I can patch it out or whatever, just return 0. And then that allows me to continue. And then we hit here. So this is interesting. This is, again, in a massive jump chain. In fact, it's underlined because if I scroll up, the debugger's lost it. So it's already like on a weird underlined instruction.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go.
Well, you're hitting an interrupt right there. Is
yeah,
that right?
exactly. Yeah. So this is cute. I like this. Int 1 is what debuggers use to tell the kernel that they want to single step. So when I'm pressing F8 to single step an instruction, it's sending that interrupt to the process. So it cuts back. They have deliberately put that instruction in there. So when running under a debugger, the debugger thinks it's debugging it, and it will stop there.
Oh,
yes.
That is clever. That is cutesy.
It is. Because what's more interesting than that is that there's the concept of structured exception handlers in Windows. So even in C, you can have try except in Windows. What they've done is, and I'll show this, let me see if I can find it. This is how I figured this out. I started looking at the beginning of all this misery, and there's, oh my God, there's just so much. Somewhere in this, MOV FS00, OXO, like a segment register, is how Windows code compiles the beginning of a try-catch block. So they've wrapped all this code in try-catch, okay? And what int1 would normally do when not run under a debugger is trigger the catch block, okay? But when running under, if I just step over this in a debugger, it won't trigger the catch block. It will just step over normally. So that catch block is probably having some sort of side effect that naively, if you were just hitting this in a debugger and stepping forward, you would never execute. And we can see this, right? So the way this works is, like in the assembly, is you push this function, and this is the except clause. So when an exception is triggered, it will call this function, which is this. And it's doing some unwinding stuff. It kind of looks exception-y, but what we can do is we can set a breakpoint on this. We can tell the debugger to pretend it's basically not caught it and continue as if the program was executing normally in this case, which is quite handy. In x64 debug, if you do debug advanced run past exceptions, it's now stopped at the exception handler. So I'm now in the except clause, as if and this is exactly what the code would be doing normally, and it's not obfuscated, which is nice. They obviously weren't expecting anyone to kind of land in here. And then like there's this weird, I don't know what this is, but it's calling some function that it's resolved from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that seems suspicious, because a lot of these have names like global unwind and early ret, but somewhere in here, I think it's got to be this. Is that the call? Wherever the call's in here somewhere, right? There. That's it. Okay, here. What's that doing? Why have they resolved some random function? So I was like, let's step down into that. And then if we step into that, we end up here. Again, back into Ghidra. That's why it's nice having them side by side. This just calls another function, which is massively obfuscated. But if we take this obfuscated one and look it up on our clean one, it's just setting a single value. It's setting a global flag. All that obfuscation is doing is hiding, setting a global flag. And I'm like, okay, well, I kind of want to know what this is. So again, now that we know what this instruction is, because this is, we just knocked out the code, but the original code is still there at the same addresses. So we can go over here, we can set a breakpoint on this, and then we can run through it. Stop there. It's like EDX is like C0005. That seems like a very deliberate number. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it is, but it's not an address. It's not like 1 or 2. It's very much like a magic number.
Something, yeah.
So a trick I like to do is when I'm trying to pass through, and you might be able to do this directly in Ghidra. I don't know. But I like to dump all the disassembled C code into a text file so I can search it. So if I've got Notepad++ here, and this is all the disassembly for every single function all in one massive long file. So everything we've seen so far, from the unstripped, from the non-clean version, this is all the code, or all the attempted code. So if you just search for C, was it 00005? Is that right? I was like, okay, it's doing something here, and then it's checking this 42C800 is not this magic value. So I'm starting to put the pieces together now. There's a special exception which it will try and not get you to if you're running under a debugger, and then that will set a flag, and then later on it will set that flag.
Gotcha.
Now I need to find this in the code. Scroll up. Because again, this is not the cleaned one. I just did this like one of the first things I did. I should probably do this for the clean one. I get the function name, and then if we go to let's do the dump first. It's in here somewhere. I don't know if I can even bother to scroll down and find it. Who knows? It's in here somewhere. But if you do if you do it in the clean version, again, the power of building out your own tools, it resets the value. It calls that int one function, which is what I've renamed it to that, and then immediately afterwards it checks it. So all that is doing is just resetting the flag, triggering the interrupt, and then checking if the exception handler was called.
Okay. That's a much smaller of a process now that we've made sense of it. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, that's what that's doing. If you continue though, so the problem I had here is that it does this a couple of times and then it crashes, right? It just hits like a bad instruction. So something is going on. If you look at the memory map of this, so where is this actually in the binary? It's in the text section, and then the text section here is like lots of like gibberish. So again, this binary itself has obfuscated code within it. So before it gets to decrypting your game, it needs to kind of decrypt or deobfuscate itself first. And presumably in that is the decryption code. Yeah. So we've got, again, like another step back. So my kind of intuition, I guess, or guess is that there's another anti-debug check somewhere, a silent one, which we're triggering, and it's causing this to not happen because it's gone through, not deobfuscated it, but it's still told it to go and try and execute the code as if it has, which will inevitably crash it. So
what's the move here? Do we kind of walk backwards via call stack again? Or
so what I do here is I then at this point I'm like, okay, I need some guidance. If you go to this website, this is basically a collection of pretty much all the known anti-debugging techniques in Windows. So if you look at, say, for instance, exceptions, in here will be the int1 thing that we saw somewhere. Maybe it's not in this one, but that's in here. There's a whole bunch of others. So really, it's just a case of grinding through these and starting to check them. So I'll pull out a couple that I found so far, but spoiler alert, I took this opportunity to move on to like another angle.
Gotcha.
But let's go through a couple of the other ones that are interesting. So some of the classic ones are debugger flags. So these are like special flags that get set in the binary by Windows when it's under a debugger. So like, is debugger present is a function that you can call to say, am I under a debugger? It's pretty much the most simplest noddy one. But let's go kernel 32.
See if they even use that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 2. So let's start again. We'll go forward. We'll go. Remember to reset because we've not patched this out yet. Reset our initial check, which doesn't use that. So that initial check is still doing something unknown, and then it hits it. Okay, fine.
Okay.
So we could patch this. We could hook it. So there's loads of things we could do. This site also tells you how to bypass these as well, so it's pretty trivial to do. I started looking at some others. Another one I like to look for is byte OXCC. OXCC is a 1-byte x86 instruction which triggers a breakpoint. That is how debuggers actually work under the hood. Every time I click this red dot, it silently patches that binary with OXCC, but just doesn't show you. So when it runs, it hits that, and then the kernel looks to see if you've got a debugger attached and calls into it. So what this code here does is it's scanning its own memory to see if you've put any breakpoints in.
Wow.
Yeah. So where's this? Do this live because this is a fun one. I like this one. I've seen this before a couple of other games. Not one of these is like foolproof, but if you put enough of them in and sort of sprinkle them around, it does start to get a little bit irritating.
That's so funny to me because I guess I'm like used to maybe my small brain, like in a malware sense. There's normally like one anti-debug trick or two, but I would not expect like 7 or 8 or 12.
And this is like 20 years ago. Like if you look at something like Denuvo now, which like I am nowhere near smart enough to look at, that is like layers upon layers upon layers of complexity. Where is the check? I just want to see if I can see OXCC in here, because it's kind of again, it's not like a little cute one to actually see happen, because I think my clean one has overzealously stripped this out. So again, I've kind of lost the context here. I sort of have to gauge roughly like how far I'm away from the bottom.
The very tiny vertical scroll bar.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably search within Ghidra. I think it's quite important to say that I'm not like a master at any of these tools. I've just picked up enough to be dangerous, and like I could definitely be a lot better at a lot of what I do. Here you go, here it is. So here's this check. So if we put this in here, and we go here, and then set a breakpoint here, if we run through to this, it's now stopped. And what's it looking at? It's looking at ECX. Let's step through again. Oh, no, actually, what I want to do is I want to put it on there where it actually passes, where it thinks it's found it, because this is just it checking everything. So if it equals, here you go, I want it on this add. Here you go. Look, you can see here that it's detected we put a breakpoint on its debugger present. Because it goes through the kernel 32 imports. It basically says, are there any kernel 32 functions that you've been trying to debug? Have you been naughty and trying to do what you're not supposed to be doing? Because this will then detect it.
That's neat.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? And one last one, super quick, is if you search for FS offset, this is that special segment register. This is how you can get special information about your process that the kernel's created for you. So when you launch a program in Windows, kernel automatically creates you a thread execution block and a process execution block. These are structs with like specific details about your process that exists one per process, and then there's a special like assembly instruction you can do to get the pointer to that basically. So for instance, like here, this is interesting to me because it's got a bunch of random offsets, and if you grind through this, there is a special flag in one of those structs which is a debugger present. So this is manually checking like the kernel structures that are created to see if there's a debugger present, and that's all listed in the site as well. That's another fun one. If you've got time for one more thing before I move on to the next thing.
Absolutely.
Where let's go back a sec. Let's go back to, because this is the bit I was like, I can fix all these. I can patch the binary. These are all solvable problems. I'll show you the bit that broke me for now, and we'll see where we get to here. So I was like, okay. So I started patching these out in the binary. You saw that like ZOR EX to return 0 for that, and I was like, it wasn't working, which was a little bit upsetting. So what I did is I was like, I took it right back to like square one. Because I was like, I'm pretty sure I found them all, and it still wasn't deobfuscating the code. I was like, is it the patching? Can it detect if it's been patched? Because that would be annoying, right?
Yeah.
Then what are you going to do?
I don't know what to do.
So here, this line here resets that global flag, the int8 exception sets to OXFF, right? So, and then later on it sets it to C005. So I was like, okay, I changed this to E, right? So it's semantically still the same, right? It's still going to be an invalid flag, and then it will try and set it to the valid one. So it's like a single byte change, and it didn't work. And that was the only change I made. I was like, oh, now that's interesting. So what I then did is I then followed in dump. I set a hardware breakpoint on it. So a hardware break in Intel and x86, there are 4 special hardware breakpoint registers that you can put an address into, and the CPU will send a message to the kernel saying someone has accessed this, and it's much less detectable than a software breakpoint. It's what's called a hardware breakpoint. But what's interesting about it is you can say, please only break when someone reads it or writes it or executes it. So a normal breakpoint will only stop when you execute it. But this is like, at this memory address, when any code writes to it, please stop, or when you read from it. So I made this 1 byte patch, and it still broke. So I was like, something might be reading this. So you do breakpoint hardware access like on this byte and continue, and then I probably need to remove that. Continue, Shift F9. Okay, repmov SD is basically memcopy. So something is reading this address. This is broken because something is reading this address. And then you put this into over here, and then I've started reversing this, and basically it turns out that it's reading its own code into a buffer and then doing something with it, presumably doing some sort of sanity check against it. And then it's got like this weird like flag which controls whether it does it through like a memcopy or whether it uses like a Win32 function. And then you kind of start stepping through all this and like trying to name stuff, and like sometimes it reads a file, sometimes it does all this, sometimes it does some function resolution. And basically I came to the conclusion that it's taking its own code and producing maybe some sort of checksum and using that as part of the key for deobfuscating the code. Because every time I changed that byte, the deobfuscated code was different. So I was like, right, okay. So now I'm another step back.
Is that it? So can I parallel that to like sort of shadow stack, like a canary of, look, this is the code how it should have been originally, and if it was tampered with at all, we'll bail out. So that feels very shadow stack to me. Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's basically the same principle. It's that it can tell that you've modified it, which is what you need to do to bypass all the anti-debugging techniques. So before I can find out what's wrong with the game, before I can run the game, before I can debug the game, I now need to patch the game. But before I can patch the game, I now need to figure out what the checksum and decryption like deobfuscation is for that. And I think I've got a reasonably good idea how to bypass this. I'm like 2 weeks in at this point, and
For sure.
the starting line is getting further and further in the distance. So I thought, okay, let's take another crack at this. Let's just see if we can get it running, because we've still got the safe disk driver to contend with, and that's more of a known problem, and I've done that before. So I was like, let's just see if we can get it running outside of a debugger. At least if we get the game running, we might be able to attach a debugger to the game, because this is still not the game, right? This is still the launcher. So I was like, let's take a break here. So the way safe disk works is it loads a driver, and I believe that driver has the low-level like knowledge to read from the CD disk, right? Because it's a kernel driver, so it has much more lower-level access than just the user land. That's my assumption. I've never really looked at it. Basically, what it does is it makes a load of calls to the driver through something called device IO control. It's a Win32. It's like ioctl in Linux. It's a way of just interfacing with the device, right? So the driver exposes a device IO control endpoint, and the game connects to that. And what it does is it sends a challenge and expects a response, basically, in a lot of cases. So and this is not a novel idea, people have done this before, but I did it myself because I wanted to see how it worked, is I implemented a shim so that I hooked all the device IO control functions. So it talked to me thinking it's the driver, then I could give it back the correct answer. Then I just reverse engineered out the correct answers.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's in code. Again, not my greatest code. That looks a lot like this. I also use this as a general sort of hooking thing for this project. So these are all the Win32 functions that I've hooked, and then I've just got code in here which allows me to basically shim them all. So,
Sheesh.
So I think here, like, is debugger present? I can hook that and just say no. So stuff like that. So that's how you can get brown back, because this is undetectable, because it all uses IAT hooking. So when an executable loads a DLL, it basically creates an array of function pointers saying, once you've loaded the DLL, can you please put the function pointers in this array, and I'll know the offset. I know is debugger present is the 10th entry, for instance.
Gotcha.
Because it won't know what address that DLL will be loaded at until it's loaded. So I just overwrite that with a pointer to my function.
Cool. And you can still call the original, but then you can get in the middle of the code.
So if you look down, if I go again, ignore my
hooking is so
code.
cool.
It's pretty cool, yeah. I have this hook IAT function, which does the monkey work of going through the PE file, finding like where the IAT is, resolving it, and then stamping it in. And then it takes the hooked function and then the original function. So when it finds the IAT entry, it pulls out what was in there, saves it off, and then shoves in the new function. So I'll be like, in kernel 32, there's create file A, please replace it with this function and stick the original function here. And then I've just done this like ad nauseum with everything that I need to do.
Nice. That's still so cool.
It's pretty good. Like, yeah. And this is like, again, this is not novel. People have known how to do this since Windows, but and there's frameworks you can do for it, but I like to do it from scratch because I think it's interesting to know how these things work under the hood. And I think it makes for slightly better storytelling as well.
Yeah. I would be like, oh, let me use minhook because that's again, all my small brain knows, but it's still so
But again, like if you needed to do this, then you should absolutely just do that. I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment and I like to kind of figure out how these things work under the hood. But like, again, if that's not your end goal, then you should just use whatever's off the shelf and just to kind of get you going. So here we do device IO control, and it has a special number that is this is the special BRM number. So if it sees this, then it intercepts it. If it sees anything else, it just forwards it on to the original because you don't know what else it's going to be doing. And then it's basically got a buffer, and inside that has like a control code, and then it just expects different responses on this basically. One fun thing is that, because what's interesting is I've seen this driver before in other games, and it's always normal, but in this one they've also put that job obfuscation on it as well, which I've not seen before, so that was kind of fun. So I cleaned it again. I used my code to kind of clean it up a bit, and I started naming things. Process ioptal. So I've named all these things, and somewhere in here it builds this like special verification number into it, like almost like a checksum, which uses the kernel tick time, so the number of ticks since the machine was booted, and it does some maths on that to produce like a checksum, and then it sends it back over, and then the game presumably verifies that. So I had to emulate that. I don't have kernel tick time in New Zealand. That's purely a kernel thing. Turns out though, if you just read from this address in any Windows process, you'll get the kernel tick count. It's just the Windows maps it in for you into every process. It's just at that address.
Okay,
so I did
that's a fun fact.
Yeah, it's like the K user data structure or something like that. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Windows always maps in a whole bunch of stuff for you at a known address, but if you take that address and get the correct offset at this address, it's the tick time.
Gotcha.
So I should have elaborated a bit on that more. And then I just did the maths and brought it back, and then let's see if it runs. Let's see if it works.
Yeah, I had took years ago like the AWE or like the advanced Windows exploitation, like one of the OffSec training for like kernel exploit, kernel driver, kernel dev, reverse engineering stuff, and there are a bunch of like K underscore whatever structures, K user, blah blah blah, that I don't remember any of, but that checks out. That makes sense. Like, oh yeah, okay, cool. The kernel ticks are still apparently going to be available.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really interesting point there, and I'd like to make this kind of very clear that none of this is ever in my head at one time, but I have seen it before, so I can kind of reference it. Like, you know that structure exists, but you can't remember the internals of it. I know that structure exists, but I can't remember the internals of it. A lot of what I'm talking over now, between all this, was lots of reading docs and familiarizing myself and, reading notes and stuff. So I kind of pulled it all together to tell a bit of a story, but this beginning to end, this is like 2 or 3 weeks of work you're seeing, sort of shrunk down to like a couple of hours. And again,
thank you.
No, absolutely. I love doing it. And again, I'm still not even there yet. So I want to run. What the game installs is this. So this is the launcher that we were looking at off the disk now. So it installs that locally, but the encrypted file is still on the disk. And then you got the and then this launcher and payload is what I have. So the way this works is when you run this launcher program that I wrote, it will create the other process for you. So it will spin up tin3.dxt, but it'll run it suspended. So it'll immediately pause itself as it's running. I then do some funky Windows stuff where I allocate some memory in that process because Windows allows you to do that. I can basically call malloc in the other process because that's just a normal thing you'd want to do. I then copy this payload DLL string into that binary. So I effectively copy my string into that running binary. I then create a remote thread, because again, that's something you can do. I can say, hey, Windows, that process over there, can I just have a new thread in there? And it's like, yeah, sure, I'll put a new thread in there for you. And I point that thread at load library with the argument of the buffer that I just wrote into it. So it basically means it will start up a thread running my DLL. That's kind of the gist of it, is through this, which is just normal Windows programming. I will have a thread in there that I control, basically. None of the other threads will know about it, so it's not particularly thread safe, but it'll be running my code. And this is where I then start doing the IAT hooking, because it's still suspended. So before the game even runs, I'm in there, I've overwritten the IAT entries, and I've done any other sort of gubbins that I need to do, and then I just resume it.
Cool.
So we'll see that. Hopefully, we'll see that working.
So process injection,
yeah,
typical malware state right out of the gate.
Yeah.
IAT function hooking. So cool.
Yeah, it's all in there. So I'm going to run this, and it won't look like it's doing anything for a bit, which is fine. But hopefully, we should see a log file that gets created, and it'll just start writing loads and loads of data to this log file because I just log it all out as I'm doing it. Let's have a look at that log file. Because
is that all of your hooked functions, like giving the notification, like, hey, we just ran, these were my arguments? That's cool.
Yes.
That's
awesome.
awesome.
So I can kind of see what's going on live. So the log...
it's being modified every moment.
Right? Okay, so again, it starts. It gives a list of all the addresses that the IT hooks that it found and hooked. Just so I know it happened. Then it does a bunch of stuff like it's looking for this, it's looking for this, it's looking for DLLs, it's looking for the sec drive file because it will try and install it if it's not installed because there's no getting away from the driver. And then basically what it starts. Oh, I just saw. Is debugger present was called, and then it basically starts doing all these device IO control, and it does loads of them. Like it just keeps going, hammering and hammering and hammering and hammering. And again, I've not patched this, I've not influenced the binary. I've just basically said, instead of talking to the driver, why don't you talk to me instead? And then I've given all those out. And hopefully somewhere at the bottom, eventually this will return. Yes, it didn't launch, which is a little bit sad. Why did that not run? I was expecting to see it. Let's just run that again. Just the DRM itself is slow. It has to do all this. And again, if it was actually reading from a CD, it'd be even slower. That should, unless I've done something wrong, I'm just checking my notes, that should cause the game to start. Because as far as it's concerned, well, it won't quite start, but it'll get it'll get further through the launch process, basically. Because again, it still doesn't have the decryption key for the ICD file, because I can't.
Gotcha.
I can't provide that, but it should get up to a bit before that. There you go. Right, so it's brings up the splash screen, and then I get another alert. It's like, can you insert the CD? What's interesting now, I think, is that the game is running, but it's effectively suspended itself because it's displayed the message box. So I can now attach another debugger. I can attach the debugger to it. And what I found is it's after all the deobfuscation stuff in the .text section. So I then dumped the running process and opened that up in Ghidra, and now I have all the deobfuscated code. So I can see what would happen if I could get past the debugger bits. I can at least see what it's doing.
Okay.
So let's attach a debugger to that. So you can attach debugger to a running process, attach it to that. We can see that it's stuck in message box A, and then it called it from here. So we'll open that in Ghidra, and we'll start having a look at what it's doing.
Are you in cleaned binary right now, or the new dumped binary?
This is being the dumped one because I believe this code. I will double check that for you. I believe this code is actually in the deobfuscated section. Why is that not?
So just for me to sanity check, we now have 3 iterations of the game binary itself, right? The original obfuscated, the cleaned unobfuscated, and now the dumped after it got somewhat through its DRM checks. Okay,
yes,
cool.
And I didn't clean the dump one because I found that a lot of the code in the deobfuscation wasn't jump obfuscated as well. They probably assumed you weren't going to get that far, so why bother going to that effort? I can't say that's entirely true, but I've not found enough that I've needed to do that yet. So if we could jump over to the clean one, I think, this is all garbage, right? I don't know what SBB ARPL is, but the same address in the dumped one is now the deobfuscated code. So at least we can see what it wants to do. And then, like, I don't know, I do this a lot in Ghidra when I'm not really sure about something. I start it could be. Maybe I should be more assertive. But it calls show message box if this value isn't 0. And then we're like, right, well, what sets that? Only one thing sets that, right? Only one thing is writing to that value. So this is probably the bit that's going to be setting that to 0 or false, or 0 or 1. And then here, what is get profile in A? This is a function I've never heard of. Turns out this is from pre-Windows 2000s, like 16-bit applications could query the special win.ini file that had a bunch of global config stuff.
Okay.
Win.ini is a text file in the C Windows directory that was there before they invented the registry. So that's what everyone used to use. Everyone used to dump all their stuff into this global text file. I was figuring this out. I didn't know all this. So this game is so old, it predates the registry.
That is bonkers.
Yeah. So I was like, and modern Windows doesn't particularly like using this, as you could imagine. But so what I was like, fine, let's go and find this like magical file. So it's like, let's see. Windows. I think it's called like Window.ini. Yeah, Window.ini.
Win.ini.
Yeah, there's not a lot in it, but this thing is saying, hey, can you get this tag and this value, this thing, and can you check if it's 99? So I was like, I mean, it's a VM, so I'm not really that fussed about breaking it. So I just added it because this is what this is checking for, which is bringing up that message box. Oh yeah, I need to run this as admin because it's doesn't like you modifying this file. And then now if we rerun it,
I still have a Win.ini on my host.
I think they do for 16-bit for compatibility with 16-bit applications, but
yeah,
no one
they just
should be using it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, everyone should be using the registry now. Now, like it's a new thing.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? There you go. So it pops up now and then immediately disappears. I don't know if you saw that.
Yep.
But the splash screen came up. So now it's progressing past that and the program is exiting, but I can't get a debugger on it because
you don't have a message box blocking you. Yeah.
I've started looking at this. So this is where I'm at now. Okay, so this is kind of like where I'm at in this whole journey. And I've started looking through some of the other DLLs there. I think it's at the point where it's trying to find the decryption key from the CD, but because I don't have a CD, it can't find it. So that's my current hypothesis. Okay. I have ordered a CD from eBay, and I'm waiting for it to arrive so I can test out this theory. Because in theory, like I should be able to slap a real CD in and it runs. And then I basically take the decision then whether I keep going about removing this DRM or try and fix the actual bug with the game. Because at least whoever's got this issue can run the game, presumably. They're not struggling with this, they're struggling with another problem. I need to take a view on where I want to spend my time, but I want to get the CD and have a play around with it and see what goes on.
Gotcha.
It might be that I can recover the key, decrypt the ICD file, fix up any misery that does that, because apparently sometimes it messes around with the imports in that and stuff like that as well. And then I will have like effectively a no CD crack that I can use, and then I can just work on patching that as needed. I don't know. I need to wait for it to arrive. That's kind of what I've got. It's kind of a whirlwind tour of like my last sort of 2 or 3 weeks of my life.
Man.
It's been quite a lot of late evenings. It's not all smiles and laughter. I go to bed quite grumpy a lot of nights because I can't figure this out. But you just come back the next day and you just keep chipping away at it.
Well, dude, this is awesome. I think this is crazy cool. I know it's a bit of a roller coaster and there's clearly a lot of effort and time that goes into it, but it's cool to see it coming together. And like, I don't know, just as you mentioned, like, hey, maybe this will end up being a video, maybe this will be on the channel or not. So I hope this is still cool for folks to see that process, a little bit of the behind the scenes, like how you go through that work and the progress that you've made, at least at a point where like, hey, there's still more to come. Very likely, maybe, possibly, we'll see. But that's still just super cool insight. So thank you, Nathan, for showing us all this. And look, are there any other highlights? Are there any other sweet stuff on your channel? If anyone wanted to scratch the itch or see more like this, any of your favorites? Is it the Diablo 2? Is it EA? Is it...
So I think I'm trying to do more videos which have like more of a satisfying ending, because a lot of the videos like I've done before, like get this far and then I can only really do about one video a month given my time commitments and the amount of effort that this takes. So if it gets towards the end of the month, sometimes I just have to like, there's interesting stuff here, people will enjoy it. I'm trying to do ones with more satisfying endings where you actually you achieve something. So I think the Securon one, the Jurassic Park game, that was a full no CD DRM defeat. That's pretty satisfying. I really enjoyed that. The audio mixing's not that great on it, so I do apologize. You might need to turn it up a little bit, but that was pretty cool. I recently fixed a bug introduced by Windows 11 in Alpha Centauri, the Sid Meier game. A lot of people have seen the GTA San Andreas bug that came with the Windows 11 patch. If you've not seen it, it's an excellent article to read. The same bug manifested itself in another game. So I went through and basically Windows in their latest release changed some of the details of like their stack layout, and then they were reading from uninitialized memory, and the game was just lucky that the uninitialized memory was the right value every single time until like 20 years later, Windows changed their internal implementation, which they're absolutely right to do. And it changed the result of an if statement, which meant it went off into some bad code and crashed. So I had to go through and patch the binary out to be like, no, don't do that. So that was cool. I also stream twice a week, or try to. That's more board engineering. That's just C++. I'm making a game in Scratch and C++ and OpenGL. There's not a lot of reverse engineering, but there's a lot of low-level C++. And that's kind of like how I get both sides of it. The videos tend to be reverse engineering. The streaming tends to be forward engineering. Different folks like different things. You're kind of welcome to come along to either or both. But yeah, I'm quite enjoying sitting down for twice a week with a bunch of people and like making progress on like a biggish C++ project.
Super cool. That is awesome. Well, hey, I'll include a link in the video description for Nathan Baggs' channel and the streams and all that you're up to. But this is so cool. Thank you again and again, Nathan. And I hope we get to do this again sometime soon. I'm excited to see where the project goes.
Absolutely great. Well, we should flip it sometime. Maybe you should show me something from your end of the world, because I haven't looked at any malware. So I think that'd be quite cool.
I'll have to find something that kind of scratches the itch of like, oh, let's crack it open in Ghidra. Let's see what all the opcodes in assembly really do. You see a lot of the PEB walk. You see a lot of like, okay, can we use any of the other thread elements to get different flags and values and pointers? So it's neat. We'll have to do this again. This is just a cool collab. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, I'll hopefully catch up with you soon then.
We'll tune out. Thanks so much.